Mel Tucker. Was he the first coach fired, and that's why we put him on the coaching carousel? Or
Yeah.
we just going to remember that one for a long time?
It was a little bit of combination of everything because Mel was the first one fired, and then when we were going through our brainstorming sessions for our graphics back when we were having them created, it was still very fresh in our minds. So I was like, yeah, we should definitely include Mel on there and get him tossed off of it.
Yeah. All right. So let's start with what we know. Okay. Craig Bohl retiring as the head coach at Wyoming. We remember that before he was the Wyoming head coach, he was the head coach at North Dakota State. Incredibly successful there. And at Wyoming, I think he's done a great job. Stylistically, they definitely have an identity, one that we have honestly, just really celebrated every single time that it's going to be windy in Laramie. And those conditions will still bring about our assumption. But, Tom, we got to be honest. We got to thank Craig Bohl and the way that he approaches a football game for being able to go hand in hand with the wind and the sun in Laramie to give us so many unders, so many. I'm wearing my Wonders. You're watching on youtube.com/cover3. I'm wearing my Wonders hoodie right now. What sort of thoughts, I guess, thoughts on Craig Bohl's time at Wyoming, but also like what kind of, and they have already, by the way, announced we're promoting internally moving forward. Jay Sawvell is going to be the next head coach. Is the expectation that the program keeps running as it has been? Are our expectations for Wyoming still the same?
I don't know. It's an interesting spot because, like, obviously Bohl came after having tremendous amount of success at North Dakota State. He'd won 3 straight Division I national titles at the FCS level. Like, they went 33-2 over a 3-year span, won 3 national titles. He leaves for the Wyoming job. And like, Wyoming is not the easiest job. Like, it's got support. It has fan support because, it's really the only show in town when it comes to like sports in Wyoming for the most part. But it is not the easiest place to recruit to because it's remote and it's hard to get players there. You're typically not going after top recruits. You're kind of getting guys like Josh Allen who maybe are late developers or who just kind of slipped in the cracks of evaluations from other schools. And it really requires somebody who can, build a program, develop players, and has a certain style. But even now in the transfer portal era, like we saw last year, they had I think it was 3 guys from their offense enter the portal. Mm-hmm. And like Levi Williams was one. They replaced him with Peasley, so that might have been more of a coaching decision, playing time decision. But they lost, their running back or receiver. They lost a bunch of key guys to the portal. And it's going to be much more difficult in this job for everybody at this level to keep those players when they do develop them. But more so than anything, it's not about Jay Sawvell. It's about what Bohl has been. Like, we have talked about it with a lot of the hires that we have seen in recent jobs, and a couple we'll probably get to here in a minute, where you're hiring a coach when they typically have success at every single level they've been at. There's a reason for it. It's sticky. It goes to the next, and they're able to build a solid program, which is what he did at Wyoming, where no, they're not winning 10, 11 games a year. They're not winning the Mountain West every season. In fact, I don't think they ever won it, but they're going bowling every year, which for Wyoming is hard to do. It's a testament to what Craig Bohl was able to do. I don't know if Jay Sawvell can do that. I'm not saying he can't, but Bohl came with a very solid kind of blueprint for what he's doing. Of course, Sawvell has worked for Bohl. He knows the blueprint. Right. He can probably keep that going. He knows the plan. So I would be optimistic, but I don't know that I could say for certain it's going to happen. No.
I think that there is now a standard and an expectation. And for a little while, I don't know if I had that for Wyoming football. Mm-hmm. I didn't go in every single year and assume that this was going to be a team that was in a bowl game. And I did not go in there every year and assume that it was going to be a top half of the Mountain West kind of team. And under Craig Bohl, there was a consistency in performance and a consistency in the finish where that was an expectation. So as we move forward, my expectations are going to remain unchanged. If Jay Sawvell doesn't meet those expectations, he's got this Craig Bohl tenure that we can point to and say, look, that's the standard. Like, that is what Wyoming football can be. And you're definitely right about the transfer portal, because what happens when, I don't know, Anywhere State says, hey, how's the social scene in Laramie? Hey, you want to come here? Like it is going to be tough, but if you recruit to an identity, you recruit the kind of players that are going to embrace it. I absolutely think that even though you're losing a coach with legitimate championship rings, you still can be able to build on that success and make sure that it's not dropping off after he leaves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's the good news is like the wind will remain in Laramie, and we could still count on that. But hopefully, the style of play remains the same too. Or maybe they come in and do the air raid in 30-mile-per-hour winds. That would be fun to see how that goes.
Would not suggest that. I'll tell you how that ends. That ends with a lot of interceptions. Okay, you try throwing the ball 40 times with unpredictable wind gusts. I don't think that. What if that's what was Josh Allen's accuracy? Josh Allen's accuracy issues.
It's also windy in Buffalo. Maybe that's the problem right now. Wow.
Put this man in a dome. All right.
Oh, wow. I'm going to be thinking about this for a while. If like Josh Allen was a Raider, would he throw for 30,000 yards a season? Maybe.
Let us know in the chat. No, I'm just kidding. All right. So we've got a little bit of buzz here on Thursday morning coming out of Duke, where Manny Diaz has reportedly emerged as the focus of the search. He's a Penn State defensive coordinator, former head coach at Miami, former defensive coordinator at Miami, and other stops as an assistant in the ACC. He knows the ACC. What are some of the initial thoughts if this does end up moving forward? Reports from ESPN's Pete Thamel and others indicating that one way or another, we might know if Diaz is going to be the guy in the next 24 hours.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting hire. I think if you look at Diaz's tenure as a head coach, like I don't know if you could say he got like a fair shake at Miami. Like no. So it's, you look at it, he was 21-15 in 3 seasons, but he was 16-9 in conference play. And to be frank, like if you look at Miami the last few years, it's on the higher end of what they've been able to do for quite a while. So I think that he has the ability to win games. I think going to Duke, like maybe he'll get the time that he needs to actually implement his style. Because like the thing about Manny is he's an incredible defensive coordinator. Like everywhere he's gone, his defenses have been tremendous. They bring a lot of pressure. They confuse the living hell out of college quarterbacks who have no idea where the pressure is coming from or when. And it just kind of rattles them. And you can see when they're playing, like a lot of guys are unsure. Like that's just tangent here. Like when evaluating guys for like NFL draft stuff, Manny Diaz's defenses are one of the defenses that I like to watch them play against because you see if they're rattled or if they're calm. And I think that is something that is worth paying attention to when you're trying to figure out how a guy is going to do at the next level. Anyways, back to Manny Diaz and Duke. I do think that considering he's replacing Elko, who was a defensive coordinator himself, like you've kind of got the pieces in place in that sense, as far as it won't be a drastic change from what they've been doing. And if you're Duke and you've got that kind of momentum going, I think you kind of want to keep that momentum. So Diaz comes in, it's not going to completely flip everything. My assumption is based on the offense he ran at Miami. It wouldn't be that different. Like it wasn't the same. It was more pro style at Miami, but I do think that, it's not that big of an adjustment. Honestly, the difference between pro style and spread is really just kind of going away. It's all the same thing for the most part now. So I think that if he gets time, he's somebody who can, do what Duke wants to do, which is be a program that is going to be competing for bowl games. Because we know Duke's not going to win the ACC. We know Duke's not really going to be committing or contending for playoff spots on the regularity. But when they get a senior-laden team, maybe they can compete for an at-large. Maybe they can win 10 games. We have seen them do it. So I think it's a good hire for him with what he was able to do at Miami, with his familiarity with the conference, and for what the realistic expectations are. That's going to be a team with a very good defense every single year, just like it was under Mike Elko. And if they get the right quarterback or the right offense in any given season, they can win a whole lot of games because of it.
So for the purposes of transparency, my read on this, if I'm going to go Sammy Scoops here, is that we don't have an official offer yet. That we've had I just want to say, like, we're saying, like, if it is a hire, grading the hire, like, We'll see. We've had a couple interviews. This is what I've got. We've had a couple interviews. I don't doubt that Pete Thamel's report, he's more sourced up than I am. Like I don't doubt that.
I don't know, Chip. You know a lot of people.
I don't doubt that he is now at the center or at the front, targeting.
Zeroing in on.
Yeah. So but for the purposes of analysis, like let's continue to move forward with this. You are spot on. I think that his finish at Miami was a little bit of a twofold kind of situation, because in one sense, like, yeah, you're right. 3 bowl teams, 1 top 25 finish, 21-15 overall, 16-9 in ACC play. But there were some like horrific losses in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think losing to FIU at the Orange Bowl, a time when Manny Diaz goes and he says that this is one of the darkest days in Miami's proud history at the post-game press conference. You assume that the lingering sting of some of those losses along the way helped Miami to make that decision. It also helped Miami to make the decision because they knew Mario was available. Like Manny Diaz,
and Mario lost to Middle Tennessee. Again, like that's my point about Miami. A lot of this is just Miami problems, not coaching problems.
Yeah. So I think that, the tenure ended at Miami in part because Mario was available, which gets me to my next piece. Let's go back. He is not going to be excited. No, excuse me. He's going to be very excited to see Mario Cristobal, aka to compete against Mario Cristobal.
Yeah.
Okay. You know who else he's going to be excited to compete against? Mac Brown.
Yeah.
Who back in the 2011 season, let me see if I can get 2013. Back in the 2013 season in week 2, he had been the head coach since the start of the 2011 season. Not head coach. He'd been the defensive coordinator at Texas since the start of the 2011 season, coming off a successful stint at Mississippi State. Manny Diaz's defense gave up 550 yards rushing to quarterback Taysom Hill and BYU, including 257 rushing yards for Taysom Hill. The very next day, Mac Brown fired Manny Diaz.
Mm-hmm.
So we would be introducing a Duke Manny Diaz as the chief rival to Mac Brown and also a conference rival to Mario Cristobal and Miami. You want to go deeper? SMU joining the ACC next year. Head coach Rhett Lashley.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The offensive coordinator for Manny Diaz back at Miami. I mean, I was describing this to shout out to Ben Swain. He and I were talking about this, and he pointed out the Mac Brown thing to me, and I was like, "Oh wow, that is awesome for that rivalry." But I really think that we've got a position where it's familiar. It's like you're dating somebody who went to the same high school as you, but you weren't necessarily best friends in high school. So all the same places, all the same names and the same stories. And because of that familiarity, there's at least a very high floor for how this goes. Who knows if it ends up meeting all of your expectations down the line, but I love being able to welcome him into an Atlantic Coast Conference where he's going to know a lot of what's going on around there. Don't forget, he also had a stint as an NC State defensive coordinator back in the early 2000s. So, I mean, our ties here to the existing Atlantic Coast Conference are pretty deep.
It's going to be a Manny Diaz revenge tour every single week.
Let's go. Hey, Tyler Van Dyke to Duke. Who says no?
Yeah, no, man. Just tentacles everywhere through this league right now.
I'm on board. I would say, seems like a great hire. I have no idea how it will work out. Also, speaking of targeting and zeroing in,
honing in on,
everybody got a chance to learn the name Bob Chesney, the Holy Cross head
Kenny's
coach,
brother. Yep.
Kenny's brother, who first emerged as a possible target for the Syracuse job, which of course goes to former Georgia secondaries coach Fran Brown. But that doesn't mean that Chesney is out of the coaching carousel, because James Madison has to make a hire to replace Curt Cignetti, who's off to Indiana. James Madison, coming off an incredibly successful season and a great debut at the FBS level, reportedly targeting Chesney. And I guess this is sort of what you were hinting at earlier, where it's like, look, if you're good at all these different levels, there's something to be said for hiring that coach, giving them more resources than they had before, and seeing what they would do with it.
Yeah, it's the same blueprint they got with Cignetti. Like Cignetti had success at other smaller schools, at other stops. They hired him when they were still at the FCS level, and obviously he was with them in the transition to FBS. So now he leaves, and you go find a coach who's been successful at like D3, D2, the FCS level. He's won everywhere he's gone. Now you're bringing him to James Madison, and he's taking over a program that is already established pretty well in the Sun Belt, as it's had a lot of success in its first few years at this level. And it's pretty easy to assume, well, not assume, but to think he's going to be just fine at James Madison, and James Madison will continue rolling. So I think it's a very solid hire that makes a whole hell of a lot of sense. And while I can't sit here and say I know a whole lot about Bob Chesney and Holy Cross, I do know that the people who do pay attention to this, that like the football in the Northeast and the FCS football, think he's great. And I respect their opinions about it. So if they think he's great, then I'm more than willing to give him the benefit of the doubt.
And I'll follow up with just the JMU side of this. I spoke with Curt Cignetti prior to the 2022 season when they were just about to make their debut for a story on CBS Sports. And man, that administration and Harrisonburg is a very sort of like enclosed community. Like it's one of those college towns in Virginia where like JMU is Harrisonburg. And they ride for JMU football, and they care very deeply about making sure that JMU football is competitive and good and, you know, at the top of whatever they are competing for, which in this case is going to be the Sun Belt. So you introduce somebody with good coaching chops to that resources fire hose. I'm excited to see what the Dukes are going to be able to do here moving forward.
I heard PFT commenters giving $5 million to NIL.
I did too. That's actually, you should call for that. You know, fans, you should call on him outright and say, and demand that he make a $5 million contribution to the NIL.
And that big cat matches.
Too. And not at Wisconsin, at JMU.
JMU. Oh, and Big Cat's already put $10 million into Wisconsin.
That's true.
Yeah.
Shout out to the boys.